Well, hello friends, and welcome back to the next video in the corncob pipe modification series. I believe this is video number 3, so we've already been through sort of an introduction and overview of cobs. And in the last video you saw me modify this cob to take out the shank extension and to replace it with some pipe mud. And it's been about a week since I recorded that video, and this has really set up nicely, and you can see you got a nice solid plug down there at the bottom. The draft hole is well positioned, and all in all this is really ready to be smoked. Now, I wanted to correct something I said in the last video. I mentioned that the pipe mud dries to a rock hard consistency, and that's not exactly true. It actually can be a bit brittle at first, and I should have explained this a bit better. So when you first let this dry and start smoking it, you should treat it carefully. So don't go jabbing down in there with a a tamper or a pipe tool. Try to be as gentle as you can with it for the first few smokes. What happens is it seems to really harden up after it's smoked a few times, and I don't know if that's because of the heat or if it's because cake actually starts to seed on it very quickly. But by the time you've smoked this 2 or 3 times, that will be, I mean, you can then tap it with a tamper, it'll be like a rock. But initially you do want to treat it with a bit of care, at least for the first maybe 2 or 3 bowls. Okay, so what this video is about is stem replacement. And I'm going to show you how to do this because these propionic plastic stems are great, but they are a bit soft, and it's easy to chew them up, and they don't have the mouthfeel of vulcanite. And I know there's companies, I'm blanking on the name of the company right now, but they sell what's called a forever stem, which is a vulcanite replacement that's already sized to fit into your Missouri meerschaum, and they're fantastic products. I've had a few of them in the past. I don't actually have any handy right now to show you, but they're basically vulcanite replacement stems, and they're quite nice. I think they also make acrylic stems, different colors and things like that if you like. And they're not terribly expensive. They're like in the $20 to $30 range, if I recall. So it's a good idea if what you're looking for is just a quick way to swap this stem out. And I'll put a link down below to that company so you can take a look at their website and what they offer. Now, that may be an option, but it's also possible to fit a stem yourself. And this is something that you can not only do, of course, on a corncob pipe, but it's a really valuable skill to have for pipe repair, or if you happen to break a stem on your pipe, you can save yourself quite a bit by doing this. This is a vulcanite blank. I'm sorry, I should say this is a molded ebonite blank. And I purchased this one from a company called Pimo Pipeworks, which is actually now owned by Steve Norris, who owns, I believe the company is called Vermont Freehand. And if you're not familiar with Steve, I've bought a few things off of him in the past. He's great company, really good quality products. And the fact that Pimo is now owned by Steve makes me feel good, because I know that Steve will continue to sell the products that Pimo has, and there'll be great customer service, as there always has been from Pimo. So that's a good deal all around. So I'll also put links down below to Steve's website and also to the Pimo website. Both websites sell a selection of stems, both ebonite as well as acrylic stems. Now, these are what are called molded. And to show you what I mean by that, I'm going to bring you in and see if I can get a little focus on this piece here. You can see that line. Where's my pointer? Been doing a lot of work and things get buried. So you can see there's a line coming right along here. So this was actually molded, and that line runs the entire length of the stem, and you can feel it. It's a sharp bit there. Also, you can see there's some molding around here, where the form sort of didn't cut off properly or oozed a bit. So basically this is a rough blank, and it needs work. But that's okay, because that's what we're going to do with it. And the price is right. So this blank cost, it was less than $5. I think it was like $4.80 or something like that. So compared to spending $20 or $30 for a replacement stem, $4.80 is not too bad. Now the problem is, well, there's several problems actually. The first is that, zoom back up, this is clearly not going to fit in here when you first buy it. So we have to reduce the dimensions here. The other problem, which is one that is a little bit hard to appreciate until you actually try to do this, is that because this is molded, there's not really sharp edges here. So if you can see here, this surface right here is not square. So you don't have a 90-degree angle here. You actually have a bit of a curve coming in to the tenon. So that area right there is curved. Now what that means is that no matter how much you try to fit this flat into a block, that's not going to go through there easily, you're going to be left with, I'm going to be able to really demonstrate this for you, you're always going to be left with a gap because that is not going to be a 90-degree square fit. There, you can kind of see there where the gap would be. So to get this to properly fit a pipe, we both need to reduce the diameter of the tenon, but we also need to square up the face of, I guess you'd call this the shoulder of the tenon. Now there's a couple ways to do that. The best way to do it is to use a metal lathe and mount this in a metal lathe, and then you can do very precise work and bring this down to the point where it exactly fits your pipe. I don't have a metal lathe, and I'm not going to be getting one anytime soon, so I'm not going to show you how to do it that way. Plus, I'm guessing most of you don't have metal lathes. If you do, then you already know how to do this, and by all means do it that way because it's really fast and very accurate. Now, there's a couple of other options. The one that I use and the one that I really recommend if you've got the right tools for it is this device, which is available from Pimo, and I also believe that Pipe Maker Emporium sells one of these. And I've talked about this in a previous video. I think it was the Stanwell restoration that I did, the Stanwell Bent Bulldog. This is a carbide cutter, and the way this works is this shaft goes down into to the draft hole and spins, and it does two things. It both cuts the diameter, and at the same time this surface here of the cutter squares up the shoulder of the tenon. So this goes one pass, and when you take it back off, you've got a perfectly fit tenon that will, assuming that you've adjusted this properly, will fit your the mortise on your pipe and will fit flush because you've squared up the shoulder. So this is a really good tool. I like it a lot. It's a bit fiddly to get it adjusted properly, and you pretty much have to play with it and sort of make slow approaches to the final diameter to make sure that you don't make this too small, because otherwise it's very easy to overshoot with this, and the adjustment is not terribly accurate, so it's really very it's a bit tedious to get this adjusted properly, I guess is what I'm saying. But once it's adjusted, it works very well. I use it on a lathe, so I actually will place this in a chuck, a Jacob's chuck with a that fits into the tailstock of my wood lathe, and I will chuck the bit into a 4-drill chuck and get it as centered as possible so that these two line up, and then this will spin and this will just go down onto it, and it works very well. You could also do that in a drill press if you have some way of sort of clamping this, and you can imagine different jigs and fixtures that you can design to clamp this properly so that you can bring this down onto it. And the nice thing about that is that this is pretty much self-centering because that guide bar has to go into the air hole. So using a drill press is actually a really good way to do this if you've got one handy. And I've seen people do it with a hand drill, and there's some instructions in the Pimo book on how to use this with a hand drill. I don't recommend that because this is going to be spinning fairly fast, and it's got that cutter on it, and I don't know. But people do it successfully that way. This tool cost about $70, so again, it's probably not something you're going to want to run out and buy if all you're trying to do is fit a single stem. So I've tried to come up with a way to do this without the specialty tools that'll make this accessible to you. especially if you're just doing one cob for fun, or if you want to do one cob for the cob foolery contest, or whatever you might be doing, or you have a pipe in your collection that needs a new stem and you just want to do this once. So I've tried to put together some fairly simple tools that will allow us to do this task. I don't know how well this is going to work. I've not tried this before. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to approach how to square up the shoulder of the tenon. And to do that, what I've done is, and it's kind of simple-minded, but we'll see how it works. So this is a block of plywood, very flat surface. I have drilled a hole. This is actually 7/16. Now I did not, you see that? I guess it doesn't matter, but I've labeled this 7/16. I have not, I didn't have a 7/16 drill bit, so I actually drilled it, let's see, I think it was 3/8, and then used a Dremel sanding drum to widen it out a bit until it just fit this very tightly. And then what I did was I took a piece of, this is a 220 grit cloth-backed sandpaper, so it's fairly rugged stuff. I used a spray adhesive to attach it to the block, and then I used an X-Acto knife to trim out that circle. So the idea is, and again, I'm not guaranteeing that this is going to work, but I can put this in now. I can hold it flush, and I can turn it. And the hope is that I will be able to square that up properly. Now, I don't know that this is going to work, but I'm sure going to try. So I will do that for a bit, and I'll get back to you. Alright folks, so I spent a bit of time, maybe about 5 minutes or so with this, and it seems to have worked okay. I did have to occasionally just take an old toothbrush and brush this off just to keep the grit fresh. And you can see it has definitely sanded the surface here. It's relatively square. If I take, this is just, it's one of these measuring cards, but it's got a fairly sharp corner here. So if I bring that in, you know, it's not, I'm not seeing a significant gap there. Let me put something light down that you can provide a better background. I don't know if that's helping much or not, but there's not a significant gap there. I think we're going to be okay. It's not perfect. There is still a little bit of a curve in there, but it's a lot better than it was, and I think that'll probably wind up fitting relatively flush. So we'll go forward with that. Now the next step is a bit more challenging. So we need to decrease this diameter. And as we do that, by the way, it may be necessary to continue to true this up over time, and we may have to make another block to do that in the end. So to decrease the diameter, I made another tool, and this one is a bit silly, but we'll see how it works. So what I did here was I just basically drilled a 3/8 inch hole in a piece of, what is this stuff called? MDF. There we go. I chose the MDF because it's nice and stable and flat, and I had some. So drilled a 3/8 inch hole and then cut it on the bandsaw right down the middle. Now 3/8 inch is, let's see, I've got a drill gauge here, and where is 3/8? 3/8 is right here. Okay, and if I take the original stem, you can see it's a loose fit. So 3/8 is actually oversized. However, because I had to cut this in half, the kerf has taken some of that diameter off. So this is actually going to be a little bit smaller in reality. Not a lot, but you can see it's a tight fit in there. Also, this is going to be somewhat decreased because I'm going to put sandpaper in here. So we have to be careful. We're going to want to sneak up on the final dimensions here. So it's a piece of MDF, 3/8 inch hole, cut it down the middle, drilled some holes here, cracked it, which shouldn't matter much, and used a bolt to sort of put the two halves together. And the idea is that this is going to, once I get it opened enough, this is going to sit in here, and we'll tighten this down a bit. And we're going to take a piece of, this is 80 grit sandpaper, that we're going to fold in half, and that's important because if we don't fold it in half, it's just going to roll around. We're going to place that in here like so, and then we're going to bring our blank in like so and try to get that all kind of nestled in there. And now we're going to compress I have to, sorry, I need to get this bolt. I made the hole a little bit too small and it's essentially threaded in there now. It's okay, we don't want it too tight, so we're just using this to apply a little bit of pressure. Right now I'm just trying to bring the top of the bolt. There we go. So this is just to apply a little bit of pressure. When I originally made this, I was thinking, well, what I planned to do at first was just put some duct tape on here and make a hinge out of it, but that wasn't sturdy enough, obviously, and I didn't have any small hinges that I could use, so I just drilled the hole and used a bolt. So now we've got the sandpaper sandwiched between one side of the MDF and the stem blank, and we can give a little bit of pressure down here. Let me zoom out a bit so you can see the whole thing. Yeah, so I just cut this out quickly on the bandsaw and did a little bit of shaping here with the sander just to make it easier to hold. So we're just going to hold this like so, and without putting too much pressure on it at all, because if we put too much pressure, I'm actually going to loosen that up a bit. If we put too much pressure on, the sandpaper is just going to slide around, going to shoot out. So just light pressure, and I'm going to turn this. And the idea is that we'll, turn it a bit, and then tighten it down a bit, turn it some more, and we may have to occasionally change out the sandpaper. The reason I folded it in half is that the other side will grab into the MDF and prevent it from sliding around. And you can see that is actually sanding it, and we are actually getting quite a bit of vulcanite off of it. Now, we want to be careful with this. If this closes all the way, we've gone too far. So we need to pay attention, and when it gets to the point where it looks like we're getting close, we'll stop and then do some hand sanding to approach the final fit. So I will continue with this, and I'll bring you back when I'm close to that final fit. Well, folks, we're back, and believe it or not, this seems to be working. So this is actually the next day. I actually spent about maybe 15 minutes after I stopped the last video just using this tool with some sandpaper in it, and was able to get the blank down very close to 3/8 of an inch. So to give you an idea of what I've done, this is actually another blank that I had that I was using before I started videoing, just to kind of get this tool set up and to see if it was going to work. So it does have some sanding on it, but you can see here this also still has the molding lines on it. So this is very close to the original diameter. I've just sort of sanded it a little bit as I was testing out the tool. And that comes in right around 7/16 on this drill gauge. I don't know if you're going to be able to actually see the numbers there, but that's a 7/16 hole. It was a tight fit when I started, mostly because of those molding lines, which have been somewhat knocked down. So that's what we started with, and this is what we now have. So we have pretty effectively decreased the diameter and kept it very concentric, which I'm happy about. And as you can see here, it is no longer a 7/16. It's actually now fitting quite easily through the 3/8 hole, which is what I was targeting when I was going to stop. Now that's still a little bit oversized for the pipe, although it's not very far off. Where's the original bit? I don't have the original bit handy to show you, but the 3/8 is pretty close. It just needs to go down a little bit more for it to fit. So we're actually pretty close to where we need to be. What I wound up doing here, what worked best was I would take this is actually 220 grit. So after I got close, I switched over to 220 grit just to make this cut down a little bit slower. And the way I would use this tool is really simple. I told you to fold the paper over, but as I was using it, I realized that it works a little bit better if what you do is actually fold the paper around the tenon, like so, and then insert it into the tool like this. Okay, I hope you were able to see that. So the paper's wrapped around the tenon and then it's sliding in like that. And then what I did was I just tightened this up as far as it would go, finger tight, squeezed it here, and I would turn it. And it turns out, depending on how you put the paper in, one direction will curl, the other direction will not. So that direction is, so now I know I can turn it that way. I haven't quite figured out which way the paper should be pointing yet, but it's early days with this tool. And that's still a little bit loose there. So what I would do is, so I'm tightening this as much as I can. I'm leaving this end flare out a little bit. And then I put pressure on this, push this in tight, and just sit here and turn away. Again, the direction is going to be dependent upon how that paper is put in. There we go. You'll feel it, the paper turning in one direction and it catches in the other. And you do a few turns and then tighten this down a little bit more. And just keep doing that. And it's surprisingly effective. It took me about 15 minutes to get to this point from this. So I was really pretty happy with that. I probably used the 80 grit sandpaper, which is quite coarse, for I don't know, 10 to 12 of those 15 minutes, and then I switched over to 220 grit just to be a little bit less aggressive and also to prevent having really thick lines in the tenon. So we're getting close. Now the problem with this method is that it does lead to more of the problem that we started with, in that if you can see, it's not, oh, my hand's shaking terribly at that magnification, it's not really cleaning up this shoulder very well. There's a significant curve there, and that's not going to fit flush when it goes into the pipe. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make another one of these blocks, and I won't bore you with this because you've already seen the basic idea. It's a block with a hole in it and some 220 grit sandpaper. I'm going to do the same, but I'll make it a 3/8 inch hole so that this will fit snugly. And I will once again flatten this out. And then what I will do is I will just very carefully go back and forth between the tenon turning tool here, I made up a name for it, and the pipe, just basically going back and forth until I get this to fit. And I need it to be a very tight fit to stay in there with just friction. So I want to be careful going back and forth. So I will do that, and when I come back we will have this fit and we'll begin to concern ourselves with the shaping of the rest of the stem. So I'll be back soon.